This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
The shorty was the big one. Anytime you get scored on the first minute of the game, half the team hadn't touched the ice yet. And so that was tough. And then to take the penalty, now you're hoping he'll go down two, and Hagel's the big one to tie it at one. So that to me was a little bit of a turning point for us early in the game, and then for us to do what we did and get that lead. Trust me, it wasn't hard. It wasn't easy. The last two periods by any means, but when you have a little bit of a lead like that, you got a little room to play with, and we defended well enough, but it did get a little. It was a little scary when we went up 5-on-3. But we got through it. Fortunately, they took a penalty. But a gutty effort with a really short bench. I think we ended up with 9 forwards at the end. And good for the guys.
Good for the guys. And yes, Steve's still getting feedback. But Bish, as we bring in Power Lunch on Lightning Radio at Bolts Radio. If you want to get involved in that conversation. A really big win on the road. And don't look now, the Lightning are in second place in the Atlantic. Much better, Steve. Thank you. And the Lightning now are in a situation where dealing with some injuries, and we're going to get to that today here at the top. But, anytime you can win on the road against a team who is playing pretty well, you'll take that every single time, won't you?
Yeah, sorry. I messed everything up, Greg, because I'm in studio for the first time since before last week, so we had to juggle a few balls. Hopefully your audio is set. My audio is set. Look, it was a road win against an excellent team, and you're going to take the 2 points, given the fact that the Lightning had injuries during the game, had to finish without a bunch of players available. It was a gutty win. It was. Did they play as well as they have in other games that they've won and even that they've lost? No, they didn't. But they did enough to build the lead, and they did enough to battle through the final 40 periods, and they got enough from Jonas Johansson, who finished with 29 saves and denied a whole bunch of scoring chances, especially in the last 2 periods. So they're done with Washington now, and you look at the 3 games they played against the Caps, they got 5 out of 6 points, which is excellent. And now they move on to a Philadelphia team that is one of these teams that has kind of moved up from kind of near the bottom of the conference and is right in the mix with a lot of other teams, but they're going to have to move forward now without some other injured guys because Point is out. Chernak is going to be out weeks, we heard this morning. A new injury that he sustained in the game against the Capitals. So they've called up Max Groshev. He won't play tonight, but that is an exciting development for fans who've been wanting and waiting to see how he does in his new position on defense. He had a very impressive preseason, like a lot of guys who started the year in Syracuse. But yeah, we can look back at the Saturday game and certainly dissect it in a comprehensive way, where the Lightning were able to score against a team that has been tough to score against in the first period, and then I thought they kind of by hooked or by crooked it the rest of the way.
Well, you mentioned the goaltending, and we took some questions before the weekend game about how the goaltending would shape up over the next handful of games. And
yeah, we thought Johansson would get one of these 3 games, the Washington, Philly, Calgary set before Thanksgiving in the back-to-back. I was not necessarily expecting he would get the Washington game, but he did and played very well.
He did, and this is a theme for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, it's coming off Andrei Vasilevsky's performance against Edmonton, so you have that against the Caps, and making the timely saves. Keep in mind Washington, had an early 1-0 lead in this game, and he allowed them to, build a nice lead, and we saw Washington push back. But all in all, I thought Johansson was the story in that game. 2 things to continue to harp on a little bit. Bjorkstrand, great to see him score a goal. I don't know if the floodgates open for him, but you always talk about when somebody's in a slump, whether it's a shooter who just needs to see that ball go through the hoop, or a quarterback have himself a good game, but start hitting some, intermediate routes rather than, balls 15, 20 yards just to gain some confidence. I think your Bjorkstrand in a similar boat. You just needed to see a goal happen, and it'll be curious to see if he's able to kind of parlay that into a nice run, for sure.
Well, the power play is going to look a little different tonight because Point's not available. So they ran a unit with Nick Paul, where Point normally is, in the bumper spot. As a lefty, he will not be available for a one-timer from Kucherov. But, and I know this is one thing that our listener Anthony has brought up. He may have actually mentioned Paul, understanding that Paul was injured at the start of the year, but Paul as an option, and he's certainly mentioned about Gensel. Paul can screen the goalie, and Paul can tip pucks. Now, if Paul is going to be kind of where Point is, he's a little higher up. He's more at the hash marks. But he is a big body who's in front of the net. And interestingly, the other guy that they used with power play one, swapping out Paul, was Finley, who's going to come back in the lineup. He is a righty. So I think he's there because he would be available for a one-timer. The Bjorkstrand goal, though, happened because Kucherov shot the puck, which is something you've been talking about quite a bit, Greg. Now, it was a one-timer. It's not like he had it on the stick and just decided to snap it. Radish fed him the puck. He took a one-timer. In the play-by-play, they gave it as a shot on net and a save for Thompson, but it did hit the post, so it must have stopped. It must have hit Thompson, went off the post, and then ricocheted to the other side. That's how Bjorkstrand had an open net. But maybe Bjorkstrand doesn't score that goal if Kucherov isn't looking to shoot. So that was how that goal materialized for the Lightning. But they are going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit in terms of how they set things up on the power play tonight, simply because they're not going to have Point available in the bumper.
And, look, for Brayden Point, you don't want to see anybody nicked up, but maybe it's an opportunity to reset a little bit as well. I don't want to say that's going to happen, and maybe that's grasping for straws or at straws, in hopes that he's able to turn around, and it's going to take him, a few games maybe just to recharge a bit, maybe. But if you do believe in something like that, then maybe this comes at a decent time. And again, I'll make the point, you'd rather have this happen earlier than later in the season when you're making a march into the playoffs. And
it doesn't sound like Point's injury is going to be too terribly long. Not tonight and maybe not Wednesday. We'll see about the weekend. But, the Lightning, let's be honest, Greg. The Lightning are going to be without, if you want to say McDonough, Hedman, and Chernak are their top three defensemen. And you're just not going to get a lot of pushback about that. You might want to include Moser in there. Certainly rounding out the quote-unquote top four. Radish's role has elevated due to opportunity. But you're without three, certainly, of your regulars and three of your best defensemen, if not the three best defensemen. And with Chernak out now week to week, McDonough's not going to start skating until next week, and Hedman is on long-term injury. So he's going to be out at the very least until December. So you're going to have to find other ways to do it without those three guys. The good news is that they have done it. They had the 2 wins prior to going to Washington without those three guys in the lineup because Chernak didn't play in either game against the Devils or Oilers. But this group of 6 is going to be put to the test. And then you have Crozier as well, who is on IR. Unclear exactly how long he is going to be out. But he's certainly going to be out, I think, through tonight. And maybe even a little bit longer. But they've called up Groshev if Crozier's return was imminent. He wasn't even on the ice this morning. So right now, what was it not that long ago, we were saying, the Lightning are really, banged up at forward. Mm-hmm. But now they are also banged up on defense, and it feels like that is the more troubling position in terms of guys who are out longer term. At forward, they still have guys injured, but Holmberg is on the brink of returning, and Point's injury doesn't seem like it's going to be too terribly long.
And credit to the depth on the back end. Again, I think we sometimes talk about the forward position, but Groshev was somebody, did you have him as someone who was going to get an opportunity to come up here potentially and be on the big club, considering the transition going to defense and how long it takes somebody to feel comfortable? But we had, really identified him as somebody, the skating ability is there. and you can see the skill. And so guys like that, those are some good tools to work with, if you're trying to get to the NHL.
Well, and he's done well on defense too. So yes, he can skate. He has the skill. They made the transition last year, and Syracuse is very happy with how he finished out last year on defense. And we were very impressed with him on defense during the preseason. It was the first time, by we, I'm really talking about people who watch the Lightning, and specifically Phil, who loved seeing Groshev on D in the preseason games that Phil announced, and me too. So it's not going to be tonight, but the fact that he's up, certainly seems that he's going to be getting into a game at some point, maybe as soon as Wednesday. We'll see.
You would think
the Lightning could elect to go 11-7. They're not doing that tonight. They're going 12-6. So basically, what you got tonight from Saturday's lineup, you got Jack Finley in for Point, and you got Steven Santini in for Chernak.
Yeah,
Kucherov is back. So we didn't really talk about that. Kucherov missed most of the final two periods after taking a clean check from Tom Wilson, but the check pushed him basically into the referee, and he banged his head. So he missed the rest of the game. Good that he was okay enough to return, less than 48 hours later. It's going to be, as he's slated to play tonight. So that is very good news. But Kucherov playing in that game when he was in the game, playing with Hagel and Cirelli, had a very good night, right? He had 3 points, and they had 2 5-on-5 goals as a line in the first period. So Kucherov is back with Hagel and Cirelli. But now you got to kind of figure out the rest of it, right? So James is with Gensel, was playing with Point, no point. So now Gonsalves moves on to that line. You got Nick Paul with Girgensons and Gord. I still think when Holmberg comes back, we're going to see a reunion of Gord, Holmberg, and Girgensons, but Holmberg's not in tonight, even though he skated this morning. And then you've got Douglas playing with Finley and Bjorkstrand, which is an interesting trio because before it was Sabourin on that line, of course. And then Santini comes in, he's playing with Carlisle.
Yeah.
So you got Radish, Moser, and Destu playing with Lilleberg.
So a lot of mixing and matching.
Yeah.
Until we get back to the lineup with the regulars. And let's face it, sometimes that doesn't happen throughout an 82-game season. You are going to have to dip into your depth more times than not. You mentioned Douglas. A lot of people were commenting afterwards about confronting Tom Wilson.
Wilson can still throw him. I mean, Wilson won that fight. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat that. I mean, did he injure Doug? He
Douglas didn't get pummeled though.
Yeah. Like you look at some guys who've been injured in fights, like Ryan Reeves injured Matt Rempe in that fight. Rempe is on the injured list for the Rangers. Douglas is fine. He served the rest of his penalty time. They didn't use him in the last couple of minutes of the game, but he's going to be on the ice. I think the Lightning were unhappy with how Wilson was running around delivering checks. Running around makes it seem reckless. I'm not sure that Wilson had any checks in the game on Saturday that would be considered illegal. I mean, the check on Kucherov was a legal check.
Right.
It's just that he was also apparently being quite vocal, and I don't think the Lightning liked the check that Rasmus Sandin laid on Dominic James, who was also momentarily injured but able to come back for the third period, and it was not long after that Douglas fought Wilson. Eric Erlandson had a very interesting point during the intermission about that fight. Now, the Lightning killed off the penalty to Douglas. There was no damage done, and the Caps didn't score on the power play, but the Lightning were already dealing with a shortened bench, and they didn't have Douglas available for basically the rest of the game because he got the instigation minor. And Eric's point was if you're going to play like Tom Wilson plays, even with your reputation and past history as a guy who is willing to fight and somebody who is a terrific fighter, a feared fighter, if you are going to deliver big checks to opposition players and you are going to chirp, if the other guy's tough guy challenges you, you should be expecting that you're going to have to answer for that. And Eric didn't like the fact that Wilson didn't fight. And basically, Douglas forced him to fight, and that's why he got the instigation penalty. And Eric's point was Douglas shouldn't have to get an instigation penalty. It's not like he went after Hendrix Lapierre, right? Hendrix Lapierre's like, I'm not really interested in fighting. You're making me fight. Okay. That's different.
Sure.
Or answering for a big check, right? Like sometimes there's a big check. The check's legal. Tough guy and the other team comes in. That's the situation where we're seeing instigation. Wilson was kind of towing the line, right, throughout that game. And this is kind of part of the code. That was Eric's point. I think he has a point, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree with
it. It didn't hurt the Lightning. And honestly, I thought the Sandin check was in a different category. That was one that should have been called, and the Caps got away with one there.
Yeah, that was
Caps fans, I guess, were
dirty.
Unhappy with the penalty that was called on, was it Chychrun, when he knocked the stick out of Gensel's hands when they had the long 5-on-3, which was about to expire.
Sure.
But they still had a 5-on-4, and they were like, oh, this is terrible. Biased referees. I'm like, yeah, let me count the power plays in this game. The Capitals have had 6. And at that point, the Lightning have had 2. Right. So, and they got away with the Sandin check on James that, like I said, I didn't think it was a major, but I thought it was a penalty and caused at least a temporary injury. So fans of teams always find reasons to get upset with
fans being fans,
the referees. But that was a huge call.
Yeah, it was.
Because the Caps are down by 1, buzzing, pressing, long 5-on-3. It's about to expire, but then they lose the rest of the power play and they have to kill a penalty later during the sequence. And I think that took a little bit of the steam out of their engine.
Not every game is going to be perfect, and even the officiating at times is going to be a little dicey, and you've got to work through those. But
by the way, if you knock a guy stick out of his hands when he's not expecting, like I think Chychrun came up behind Gensel and flipped the stick out, you're already down 2 men, and now you like knock Gensel's stick away.
Yeah, that's a penalty. That's going to be a penalty. Yeah,
you got to be. I thought Chychrun had a great game.
Yeah,
great game. Did I make him I was thinking about making him a star. I didn't make him a star in my broadcast. He had a goal and an assist. He had chances. Great in all situations. Power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5. Somehow he finished -2, which is surprising to me because I thought he was fantastic in the game. That was a terrible penalty that he took. Anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I took a lot of comments, or I saw some comments too on X about just the shot total again being somewhat low for Tampa Bay. Now, look, some of that is you're killing penalties too, and if you're in the box, that can be an issue. But
they didn't have the puck, Greg.
Yeah,
that's why the shot total was down. I mean, in the first period, they got outshot. It was 9-6. I think the Lightning had more scoring chances than Washington. That's how they were able to score 4 goals.
That is true.
Shot attempts were reasonable. I mean, it was 23-15 Washington. Like Washington was having more of a shooting mentality than the Lightning. But I think if the Lightning had, maintained 15 shot attempts a period, finished with, what that would have been, 45. Well, they finished with 39. So it was a medium low. It was really noticeable in the second and third because the ice became tilted. And I think I mentioned to you in our segment after the game, shot attempts unofficially in the last 2 periods were 53-24.
Right.
So the Lightning only had 24 total shot attempts in the last 2 periods. Why? Were they passing up shots? Was this like the Edmonton game? No, it wasn't. They were not executing cleanly with the puck, which was helping Washington. Washington was having an advantage in possession because the Caps were doing a lot of good things to maintain possession. But then the Lightning were also fumbling pucks. I'm not sure they were always fueling the other team's attack, but they were not helping themselves because they were very sloppy with their puck play. You could see it.
That's true.
I said they had a case of fumbleitis at one point when Ethan Frank scored after a fumbled puck led to a turnover, and Frank scored. And that was why it was a little bit by hook or by crook, because they just weren't clean. But some of that might have been the shortened bench. Some of that might have been the momentum in their face. And I'm going to say this, Greg. This is where you miss a Ryan McDonagh. It's not just that Ryan McDonagh defends as well as any player in the NHL. It's not just that Ryan McDonagh will block a shot. It's not just that Ryan McDonagh is your best defensive defenseman, 5-on-5, penalty kill, 5-on-6. Ryan McDonagh reels a game in that is coming off the rails a little bit for you.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's not like the Lightning were giving up 25 scoring chances, but they felt some pushback, and I felt that they really couldn't turn the faucet off. That's where a McDonagh is like, settle down. We got this. Now, of course, he's played in enough games with the Lightning where sometimes that doesn't happen, but that is where that veteran presence on defense Brian talks about this. He reels the game back in. And I felt like the Lightning, they never really reeled the game back in until Cirelli scored to make it 5-3. And then they got a little boost of momentum. They made it play offensively. So, you talk about like, how do they manage without some of these key guys? Well, it's not only the guys that are missing or, providing big goals or assists or whatever. Sometimes it's also what they bring on the bench, right? Or just kind of the atmosphere of the game, the way they can affect that.
Yep.
So we can't go back and rewrite history, but, if McDonagh had been in the game in the second and third periods, would the Lightning have looked a little cleaner? I don't know, but I think it's possible they would have. And I don't mean to get down on them. Look, they got the job done, right? But if you're getting out-attempted well more than 2-1 against a team as good as Washington, you could be in jeopardy of blowing a big lead, and they almost did it. If not for Johansson, the Caps would have tied that game for sure. Think about the saves he made.
I mean, he was incredible.
Stopped Carlson on the doorstep in the second period. Stopped an Ovechkin breakaway twice in the third period. Made 2 saves on the 5-on-3. They were tough stops. I mean, I could count up the number of dangerous chances he faced. There were a lot that he turned aside.
How do you get Ovechkin loose for a breakaway?
Yeah, because he's not exactly
he's not a burner.
Blazing speed anymore. But this guy has found a home in Washington, and they are so happy to have him. Dylan Strome has become a 1C. Like, he is a legit 1C.
He's a good player.
He facilitates a lot for them, and he's great on faceoffs. Very, very good player. So he's the one who delivered that pass to Ovechkin, who had cherry-picked, kind of like Kucherov had in the first period.
And I think Moser was the defenseman.
Yeah, they lost track of him, and he had he doesn't have blazing speed, but he didn't start from a stop. He was moving already, which gave him a little bit of a head start too. And he had 2 shots. The second save was a tough save for Johansson because Ovechkin tried to go 5-hole. He's going down in the butterfly to make that second save. How about the save he made on Chychrun this was after it was 5-3, but there was the one chance the Caps had with the net empty. Chychrun was open in front. He wheeled on his forehand. It looked like the 5-hole was going to be open because Johansson has to move side to side, and he made that save too. That was with over a minute left. If Chychrun puts that in, it's 5-4. And now you're, white-knuckling the last minute and change.
For sure.
Johansson was outstanding in the game.
He's been really good since he's been a member of the Lightning organization. Just really, really solid. And again, anytime you can get a win on the road with your backup, I always feel like that's a big, big deal. Before we get to some questions, partner, you can catch Gabby Shirley and Ben Pierce with a new episode of Into the Blue podcast presented by Penelope Bourbon. This afternoon, 3 p.m., they're going to be live streaming it on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Send your questions in during the show about the 3-game win streak and the upcoming week for the Bolts that includes 4 games. The Into the Blue podcast released every Monday at 3 p.m. on the Lightning Audio Network. All right, let's get to some questions.
We can touch on we can take questions, and then maybe we'll finish with the Flyers because I was chatting with their broadcasters this morning. It does look like Sam Ersson, who has played less than more this year for the Flyers, is getting the start tonight for Philadelphia.
It's good to know. Basil on X says, that was a great W, but not a great game. Bolts got away with a lot of mistakes, especially in the D zone. But the level of compete was as good as they grinded out, getting annoyed with coming out of every Caps game battered and beaten as Wilson runs roughshod over us.
Well, look, we call it like we see it. These Wilson checks, at least against the Lightning, they're all clean. He delivers big checks. He checked Moser in the first game. I mean, these are checks where I mentioned them, Greg. You're like, yes, I remember that. Like, Wilson delivers checks that are memorable. He hammered Moser in the first meeting. He hammered Holmberg in the second meeting, and Holmberg hasn't played since, although he finished that game. And he checked Kucherov, and that wasn't even a thunderous check, but it was just bad luck that Kucherov was pushed into the referee and banged his head. He doesn't fight as much anymore, but he can make his presence felt physically.
Did I see... I think I saw, it must have been on The Athletic. And it basically, the headline was for that last spot, and this was, I didn't read the whole article.
On Wilson, Team Canada?
Yeah, Wilson or Bedard. Basically making that argument that Bedard seems like a logical choice because he's a highly skilled player and can fit up and down the lineup. But then Wilson is a unique guy too. Yeah. And we've kind of talked about that. I know there's no fighting in the Olympics.
There is checking, though.
There is checking, and he's a guy that can make an impact one way or the other. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that topic. I think he should be on Team. Like, if I was Team Canada, to me, Tom Wilson makes a lot of sense in a lot of different ways.
You're not going to have another player like Wilson on the team. Because there are very few players like him. There
are more Bedards.
There are very few players like him.
Yeah.
And there are no players like him that would make an Olympic team other than him.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's fair to say. Greg says...
And by the way, what else Basil said, I agree with. They were not clean in the defensive zone, but the battle level was there. That part is true.
Right. Yeah.
They were just fighting momentum, fighting the momentum against, fighting the puck, fighting what the Caps were throwing at them. It just didn't come easily in the final 40 minutes, but they were able to get through it.
But the Caps were playing well. They were coming in playing well. And I think you have to take that into consideration as well, again, with the injuries the Lightning were facing. Greg says, thanks for the show, guys. It truly has become part of my day that I look forward to. Curious what you guys think of the Groshev call-up with point likely scratched. Will he come in for Douglas? So we kind of addressed that. But
yeah, so Groshev is no longer a forward. Groshev is a defenseman. Groshev was called up, if you want to look at it this way, because Chernak is going to be out.
Yes.
So Groshev becomes the seventh defenseman, but the Lightning are addressing seven defensemen tonight. Finley is coming in for point. So the Lightning had two players that were scratched, healthy scratched, against the Capitals, Santini and Finley. They are both in tonight. But Groshev is on the roster.
Yes.
Won't play tonight.
Tampa Bay says, do we know what exactly happened to Point in the Caps game?
No, I wasn't even aware that he went down the tunnel late in the second because that happened shortly after James clearly went down the tunnel late in the second. Point came back. I think he had one shift in the third period, and then it was noticeable that he wasn't playing anymore because the Lightning had a power play, and he wasn't out there. So, unclear. I actually asked Brian Engblom this morning because sometimes TV has some replays that I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what had happened either.
Whatever it is.
We've had fans ask, is Point dealing with something? I mean, I didn't think he was. So, I mean, Coop answered the question that he is not going to play tonight and is, quote-unquote, iffy for the Calgary game. But it didn't sound like it was going to be like a week-to-week thing. Like it's going to be with Chernak or Hedman, for that matter. So nobody asked a follow-up like, is this something he's been dealing with or did it just happen in the Washington game? I did not get the sense that he was dealing with something before Saturday, though.
Chris says, we are so lucky to have gotten Hagel, who just continues to dominate. JoJo was excellent. The depleted D continued to play as well as can be expected. Hoping we can go a week without any more injuries.
Yeah, you know a team that has actually done well to avoid the injury bug this year? Philadelphia. They're one of the rare teams because they were the broadcasters, Tim Saunders and Jim Jackson. We were chatting with them this morning. And like, the Flyers have actually been kind of healthy. He said also they played a lot of home games, which is not always Like, it's not always causation, right?
Sure.
If you're at home, you can have injuries. The Lightning have had injuries at home, but they haven't had the rigors of travel yet. They've played the vast majority of their games at home to start the year. So they felt that might have factored in. But it's not just the Lightning. A lot of teams are having injuries this year. And what we said when the injury bug first started to hit the Lightning, it sounded like many of these injuries were not long-term. And there was an element of truth to that, but now it's looking like some of them are longer term. McDonough's going to end up missing, we'll just say several weeks. Hedman and Chernak for sure are going to miss several weeks.
I feel it's a conversation that is not going to go anywhere, but I do think it's interesting to bring up. Steve Kerr was pretty open. I think this was a couple of weeks ago, and he's been vocal about this, of course, in the NBA, that the wear and tear on the players, it's too long. The season's too long. You're seeing a lot of guys, a lot of teams be depleted injury-wise. I wonder if that's the case in the NHL. It is a long season. It is a grueling season. Forget the travel. These guys really don't get an off season. They train their body. There is constant work on it. There's constant maintenance. While you would think these elite players, partner, are conditioned to play an 82-game season, I think there's a difference between being conditioned from a cardio perspective and being able to do 82 games than there is, can you actually go through the rigors of the schedule where there's a lot of checking, there's shots being blocked, there's all of these things in addition to, hey, partner, I can run 5 miles in 30 minutes. I'm in shape, and I'm not saying that's what they're saying. But I do wonder, look, the NFL has extended more in the regular season, although, they're going to be cutting back in the preseason. I understand that. But I do wonder when everybody keeps talking about, boy, there does seem like there's a lot of injuries. There does seem like a lot of injuries. That conversation's every year. But we also know the players are in the best shape they've ever been. So
yeah,
what is it? And it could be your body just isn't meant to play 82 games all the time. With everything that is going on and how physically demanding the sport is.
Well, buckle up because next year it's going to 84.
Well, that's what I mean. It keeps going up.
Right, but next year there's no Olympic break.
Right.
So, the Olympic break is forcing, I'll just say, more of a condensed schedule. I mean, last year it felt like we had a condensed schedule too because of the Four Nations tournament, which was not as long of a break. We'll see. I mean, so basketball can be a physical game. There's no question. I'm not saying it's not physical, but you're not stepping in front of 100-mile-an-hour slap shots in basketball. So there is no wear and tear component to getting injured by blocking a shot.
Sure.
And that's what happened to McDonough. There is no wear and tear component to getting hammered by Tom Wilson against the boards and having an injury, which is what happened to Holmberg. So some of these injuries are just in the course of playing a very physical game where, you could get hurt. There's no way to play the game and avoid potential pitfalls from injuries. I think the question is, are we seeing wear and tear injuries, though, that would be separate from a block shot, right? And I don't have the answer to that. Part of it is we don't get the information on exactly what the injuries are many times unless it's very obvious. But
I'm wondering
that the teams know. So the teams are probably going to teams don't want players to get injured due to wear and tear problems. So if that's an issue, they're going to try and reduce the wear and tear. Maybe that's more rest.
See, I do look at wear and tear as part of the strategies blocking shots. That's part of every game. And so you and I have had this conversation about Eric Chernak. There's a cumulative effect of him going down, I think, personally, of blocking how many shots through the course of his career and having an impact. And does that mean that you're a little more susceptible to having a bruise or a break or just slowing down because maybe you've taken so many shots to the ankle? That's
but
more.
I mean, a block shot leading to an injury could happen in the second game of the year where you haven't had a rigorous schedule.
It could. Yeah, it could.
I mean, what you're saying is, 82 games, condensed schedule, it's too much. you might say, well, players shouldn't block shots and therefore they wouldn't get hurt, but that's part
that's
of
not changing.
being
That's
in
part
the
of the
NHL.
game.
That's not
yeah,
changing.
that's part of the game.
And they have the equipment which does protect them except when it doesn't.
Which does nothing.
You know, you talk to Phil and he's like, when I played, you know, the equipment, nobody blocked shots because that was the goalie's job.
Sure.
You know?
I think
But the equipment was less
I feel like the
armor then.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like the equipment out of any position that it's benefited the most has been the goaltender position. Because to Phil's point,
for the non-goalies,
that's armor, baby. That's armor.
Yeah.
Whew.
But for the non-goalies, they have better, more protective gear than when Phil played.
That is true.
That's
true.
That's what Phil's point.
Alan says the Washington game, JoJo was outstanding. What a Vasi-esque performance.
Hard to argue. And another one
great.
of these games where, you know, at the end of the night he gave up 3, but it's hard to argue with, you know, the performance that he had. I mean, one went in off Gonsalvez's stick or skate. Another one. I mean, how many goals have the Lightning allowed this year? That's like weird deflections. But
he's not going to make it. I think JoJo should be considered to be one of the goaltenders for Team Sweden. I do.
Well, did you see in Minnesota, one guy that we've talked about is Gustafsson, but I'm guessing that
Is he hurt?
Wallstad is also Swedish.
Yeah.
But he's running away with the number 1 position because he's on a long winning streak. I don't know if they're going to put Wallstad in the Swedish net.
I don't know.
And Markstrom is New Jersey's having a good year until recently. They're on a losing streak now. But, you know, Markstrom's numbers are not great this year.
No, you'd have to bump somebody, and he probably typically the goaltenders that are going are starters. So I get that. But it almost makes Johansson even a perfect fit there because you're not tinkering too much with how his day-to-day would go. He probably goes in there, I'm not going to play. I'm kind of used to that, and, you know, I'm not going to be thrown off, and obviously I would love to represent my country. I'm just saying, I think his play warrants at least. I'd be curious. Is he getting consideration? That's all I would ask.
He may. You know, we were having a discussion the other night at dinner on the road in Washington. I was out with the other broadcasters, and we were at a sponsor function, and the topic came up about the Olympics. And, you know, you look at the different countries after Canada and the U.S.
Yeah.
There are some high-end players that are going to be playing for all of these countries that are participating. Of course, Russia is not participating, so you're removing them. But it's hard to argue that any country can even come close to the depth of Canada or the U.S. I mean, you were just talking about Wilson or Bedard. If that's the last forward spot for Canada, is there any other, let's just say, European country that would have that same good problem to have?
I'd have to. My initial reaction is no.
Now, does that mean that, you know, the Czech Republic, I still call it that, I know it's Czechia. Does that mean that, you know, the Czech Republic or Sweden or Finland can't go on a run in the Olympics and do very well? Of course it doesn't mean that. They have excellent players that are going to be playing on those teams. And also how you play as a team can matter. So even if you don't necessarily have all the star power, if you're playing as a cohesive group, that can help you win games in a short tournament. But it's really become noticeable that there is less depth for these individual European countries than what Canada and the U.S. can boast. And I think that has changed a little bit going back to, you know, let's say the last time the NHL had players in the Olympics.
Which other country can field a full team comprised of NHLers?
Well, I think Sweden can.
I think Sweden
and
can.
Finland can. But, I mean, they're not going to have a Tom Wilson as the 12th forward. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, I think those other two countries come close. Russia, of course, would, I think, at this point. So I think there's like 5 nations that probably, this wasn't your question, but I'm answering, can field a full 23-man roster of NHLers. Probably.
Yeah.
And then you get to the other ones, and it's like Germany. What is, you know, Germany?
Yeah,
Draisaitl.
they're going to have Draisaitl.
And
so they're
going to
have J.J. Paterka. Like, they're going to have high-end NHL players. They're just not going to have the same depth. I actually saw Moser this morning because Switzerland came up. Switzerland has some good players.
Who do they have?
Well, I mean, you've got Hischier. You got, if Yossi's healthy, you've got Hischier. You got Yossi. You got Siegenthaler. You got Timo Meyer. JJ Moser, certainly.
That's a pretty good lineup. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some good players. Niederreiter can be on that team.
That's right.
But, I said we were trying to think who's going to be the Swiss goalie. And I said to him, who do you think will be the Swiss goalie? And he said, well, Akira Schmid is the NHL goalie. I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
He's like, he mentioned another guy. He's like, he's actually going to be the guy. He's like, he never got a chance in the NHL. It's probably too late for him now. And I said, has he been the main guy during the World Championships? And he's like, yeah, I didn't ask him for the name.
That would be interesting.
To write it down.
Yeah.
But so like Switzerland is going to be a mix.
Yeah. Right.
Switzerland's going to have some NHL guys, and they're going to have some guys who are playing in European leagues, and that's probably common for a lot.
Latvia,
like Germany.
Latvia,
Germany is going to have a mix. Latvia is another one.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. That's always fun. I always kind of like seeing some, Gergensen's on a first line, drive and play, and he's like, give me the puck. I kind of like that. I've seen a lot of this come through, partner, and I think I speak for everybody. This was Cow Lover. How about that 24 years? I never get it to catch this show live, and this is the first chance I've gotten in a while. But Dave's call for the OT save winner was incredible. Best radio broadcaster in the game. Hear, hear.
Well, thank you, Cow Lover. I appreciate it. I just try and react to what's happening on the ice, and that deserved a couple exclamation points based on, I think he's referring to the Edmonton
Yes, he had to have.
game to finish.
I saw, so there was the live version that's been, that it can see you in the booth calling that overtime.
Yeah. We have that GoPro camera.
We do. So
for every game, but we don't always get highlights like that.
Somebody, one of the comments, he goes, the guy next to Phil on the left looks bored.
Yeah, we know. We know
I should have wrote something back and said, I'll let him know next time.
You were actually, you were calculating your fastest route downstairs.
How do I get down
probably.
Here? Am I going to be able to make the last call in time? No, that was pretty funny. By the way, tonight, enjoy some Refrum, smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Refrum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Refrum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. Let's get to a couple of more questions, and then do you want to get into Philly a little bit, and then we can end the show with a little bit more time. Alan says, this podcast is part of my day. Any possibility of having a Friday segment every week with a Mr. Phil Esposito sponsored by Refrum?
We've had Phil on a couple of times.
I feel like Phil's
usually on the golf course, I think, when we're doing our show. But
we'd love to have Phil on.
Yeah.
We'd have to make sure he gets the link and the camera right, because
I saw actually Jim from Jacksonville had a question that got forwarded, and I don't have it in front of me, but I know what he was asking. So the Flyers in their last game had 3 goals that they scored in a 26-second span, which is a franchise record. It's the fastest 3 goals scored, I think I read in the notes, in the 21st century. So, I mean, 3 goals in 26 seconds is pretty remarkable. Wow. Yeah. And 2 of them were scored by Forster, who got goals 2 and 3. But the record was set by the Bruins when Phil was playing for them in 1970-71 season. 3 goals in 20 seconds. So Jim was like, could you ask Phil if he remembers that game? So we'll ask him tonight. We can't ask him on the show, but Phil had an assist. Jim had the box score in there. Phil had an assist on the first of those goals. It's really amazing that Phil came off the ice after the first of those goals. He doesn't like and didn't like coming off the ice.
David. That's what he always gets going. Let's get to this one. Anthony, difference on the power play right now is that Gensel moved to the back post more and Cooch has less time with the puck. Finally, some one-timers. Would like to have a look at Stahoviak if Point is out.
Yes, so Anthony, I was actually thinking of your comments because Gensel in the goal or in the game in which he had a hat trick, which was the Devils game, had his 2 goals where he kind of went to that opposite post, but he's not camping out there. So I mean, he's moving around, but that's reading what's open, and the Radish pass to him in the Devils game.
Yeah.
He is on the back post and was open, and Radish made a really smart play, and then Kucherov for the final goal So Kucherov drifted more to the bottom of the circle, and that's when, maybe he saw that Gensel was there. He drifted more to the bottom of the circle to get the pass across. So look, variety is fine, but I don't think that Gensel was always planted at the goal line extended. I think he's there as an option for Kucherov. They are moving the puck more quickly. They're moving the puck more confidently when Kucherov is available. Kucherov was not available for the second and third power play chances that they had against the Caps. But the first one, which was a shortened one, because the Caps took a penalty, go back to the beginning of the show, Steve played the clip from Coop. He talked about the shorthanded goal that Hagel scored being a big one. It was, because the Lightning had a bad start to the game. Goal against, take a penalty, you're killing a penalty, Hagel scores shorthanded, completely changed how that first period was unfolding, and then the Caps take a penalty later on the same power play. So there's a 4-on-4, and then the Lightning get a power play that's a shortened power play. They made the most of it. They zipped it around. They had some good looks. They had their swag. Cooch takes a one-timer.
Sure.
Leads to an open net rebound for Bjorkstrand. So it's as much, I'm repeating myself here, and you are too, because you have agreed with me on this and you've said the same. When the power play is moving the puck confidently, it matters less where the players are and more about, are they breaking down the opposition penalty kill? And all of these things that happen, whether it's Kucherov shooting one-timers or rebounds or Gensel being at the front of the net, all of these things are happening as a result of them, I'll use this expression, playing to their standard. Playing to their standard means bing, bang, boom, right? Like the puck is moving and the penalty kill team is forced to react rather than the penalty kill team forcing the power play unit. That's the difference. Hopefully they can keep it going. The Flyers have a good kill, 85% coming in just behind the Lightning. So it'll be a challenge tonight without point. Stahoviak's a lefty, Anthony. So if Stahoviak does come up, I don't know if they're just going to throw him right on the power play. But, with Paul as a lefty in the bumper, it takes away that pass to the bumper from Kucherov for a one-timer unless he's on the other side. So we'll see how it looks tonight.
Listen, it's never a bad play to have the power play run through Gensel and Kucherov. In many ways, it does for Kuch. I think we've talked about maybe does he become a little bit more of a shooter when things are stagnant, particularly on the opposite side with that one-timer from Bjorkstrand. Point taken. But I do think if you're unsure of going cross-ice to him, it's never a bad play to go down low to Gensel.
Mm-hmm.
And whether he distributes it to point in the bumper or just goes hard to the net, he usually makes the right play. And I think it's just a matter of, is that available? Before we get to the Flyers, Bolts fan 1997 says, Greg, these players are all professionals, and this is their career. And in most cases, they get paid millions of dollars.
Is that a response to something you said?
I think it might have been the season being too long.
Oh, okay.
And I get, look, I mean, they have to agree on these.
They're willing. I mean, players love to play.
Well, that's what I mean.
The players are not saying we want to play less. I think you're saying that as a byproduct of
I'm just saying
all the injuries.
Look, salaries have gone up. Even the players who are making minimum wage in these leagues are making more than they ever have. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It's a better game because you're playing more games. And the premise, the question was, why are all these injuries happening? Because there's a lot of people who feel like these injuries are happening. Why is that?
Yeah. And my point is some of these injuries I think would have happened in any season, but maybe some of them are special to this year because of the condensed schedule.
Yeah.
What I will say is this, and Coop mentioned this morning, I mean, yes, we can go back and look. They've had other injuries. They've had other significant injuries. But he's like, this is really the first time since 2017 that we've had these sorts of injuries, which that year that they missed the playoffs by a point, they had a lot of significant injuries. They had Stamkos miss basically most of the year. Tyler Johnson was in and out of the lineup. Point, his rookie year, missed, I think, close to 2 months. They had injuries that year. They've had injuries since then. I mean, Stamkos didn't play in the bubble. You can go back and look. Last year, J.J. Moser missed a couple of months. I mean, he was a big part of what they were doing last year in terms of significant injuries. But what I will say to the injury bug hitting the Lightning in this way this year is this. This year they have the reinforcements coming up from Syracuse that have really helped push things forward, so that the Lightning, I think they're 11-3 in their last 14 games, and some of those points they've been gained with a lot of key players out of the lineup. Now you have to keep it going because
Sure.
At least on defense, the Lightning are not going to be back even close to full health for quite some time.
They aren't, and this is where depth becomes a really tested.
You want to get a little bit into the Flyers?
Yeah, let's do this one real
question.
quick. Yeah, SQUW, or we'll just call it SQ Williams. How many times have the Lightning allowed a goal within the first couple of minutes? Feels like we've allowed that for a lot of games.
Yeah, and Washington actually had the stat that the Caps have been a team to score a lot of goals in the first, or at least in the first 5 minutes of a game, they have scored in a number of games.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've always scored more than one, but in the last two against the Lightning, they did it in both. Edmonton did it. If you recall, that was the Frederick goal that came pretty early in the game. I mean, look, it's happening. It's not really hurting the Lightning, I think, too much, in that they've been able to, at least in the three games that I just mentioned, they've won all three. The two against Washington and the one against Edmonton. Not ideal, though, to be trailing early in a game.
What do we want to get into with the Flyers? They're playing well.
So this is game number 21 for the Flyers. They have only played 7 road games. So they're split so far, 13 at home, 7 on the road. They've been good at home, 8-3-2. That's why they are where they are. They're a 500 team on the road, hockey 500, 3-3-1. Now things are going to start to get a little bit more difficult for the Flyers as they play more on the road, not that they can't do well. They are better defensively than they were last year. Rick Tocchet is now their head coach. How much of that is him? How much of that is the goaltending? Because Ersson has kind of been supplanted by Dan Vladar, who has played more and has played better than Ersson. Ersson's save percentage, even though Ersson is 3-1-2, his save percentage is .846. And that's exceedingly low. Not quite as low as Pickard's was, who actually played pretty well against the Lightning with Edmonton last week. But by comparison, Vladar's save percentage is .912. And Vladar's goals against is almost a full goal against better than Ersson's. Yeah. So Vladar has carried the load for them defensively, and they are better defensively than they were last year. They are over the moon with Trevor Zegras. So Philly and Anaheim have had a lot of deals back and forth. The Gauthier trade that brought Jamie Drysdale to Philly. This was another one where the Ducks were ready to move on from Zegras. I mean, the Flyers really didn't give up much. Not that Ryan Poehling isn't an NHL player. He is. I think they traded Poehling and they traded a couple of draft picks, not a first-round pick. Zegras has had a lot of injury problems. He is kind of a controversial player in that he's got a lot of skill, but as the rest of his game where it needs to be, he has been fantastic for them. He's virtually unstoppable in the shootout. He's 3 for 3 this year. I think his career shootout percentage is over 65% or something like that. Yeah, he's got a lot of tools in his toolbox, but you look at his numbers this year, he's got 21 points in 20 games, and he's even. So, I mean, that was kind of the knock on him. Could he play well defensively? And the Flyers have some minus players on their team. So, he's better than some of the other guys they have. So, look, they've taken advantage of, we'll call it, a more advantageous schedule at the start of the year, and they've played a lot of close games. I didn't get into this last week. I wrote a column about it. Maybe this is a topic we can come back to and as we monitor what's happening in the NHL. But the column was about why is the Eastern Conference so packed? And one reason is that teams that have been out of the playoffs are doing better, and some teams that are comfortably in the playoffs from past years are not doing quite as well. So, I mean, they haven't fallen off the map, but you have a lot of teams all bunched together. But the other and maybe more telling reason is the number of overtime games that have been played in the league this year. There have been a lot of overtime games played in the league this year. Now, there's no way for me to kind of quantify that. I'm not an analytics person. I didn't have access to like how many overtime games were played a quarter of the way through last season compared to this season. So what I did was I just looked at the end of last year, and then I went back one more year and I looked at the end of the 23-24 season because you can see how many overtime games every team plays. So I was like, all right, we're about a quarter of the way through this season. What do the numbers tell us? Last year, Greg, 24-25 in the regular season, every team played at least 10 overtime games. So nobody was in single digits. But most teams were between 10 and 20. There were only 7 teams that played more than 20 overtime games, and the 2 highest were tied with 24. So we're not talking 28, 29. 24 was the high water mark. A quarter of the way into the season, and we weren't even quite at a quarter of the way through the season when I wrote this column last week, you had 17 of 32 teams, more than half, were on pace to match or eclipse the 24 number from last year. So in other words, you had more than half the league with 6 or more overtime games played. Multiply that by 4. The Flyers are at 9 overtime games. They played 20 games. Almost half of their games have gone to overtime.
Yeah.
They're on pace to play 36 overtime games during the regular season. Remember, last year, the high watermark was 24. So what are we going to see the rest of the year? Well, logic tells us that in the second half of the year, games tend to get even closer, right? Again, I don't have the stats to back this up, but if there are more overtime games traditionally in the second half of the year than the first half of the year, maybe this will continue. I don't know. But you're like, how are the Flyers doing it? Well, they get a lot of games to overtime.
Yep.
They're defending reasonably well. They are exceptional in the shootout, thanks in large part to Zegras. And they're 5 games above Hockey 500. That's how you do it, right?
That's how you do it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's sustainable, but we're gonna see how they play tonight. They have a good team. Like, they have good players. Tippett's a good player. This Tyson Forster had the 2 goals last game. He's a good player. Matvei Michkov he's controversial. I think he drives some people in the Philly market that follow the team kind of crazy because he's got the skill, but he got into whatever it was with Couturier earlier this year, and Tocchet had to get involved. But there's no doubting that he has a lot of ability. This is a sneaky pickup. Christian Dvorak, he's a good player last few years in Montreal. He's on their team this year. He's got 6 goals and 14 points. He's a plus player. So
they've got 10 players.
It'll be a good test for the Lightning tonight.
They got 10 players, I think, with 10 points or more. So they're getting depth scoring. And Tocchet, I think, is a good coach.
I agree.
I think he's a good coach, and I think you want to talk about somebody, partner, that commands some respect, particularly in Philadelphia, where he was, a legend. That guy is as good as they come from that perspective. So this should be a good game, and we will have the call for you starting at 6:30 with the pregame show. By the way, we have just 2 tables left for our live recording of the Block Party podcast tomorrow night at the Cigar City Tap Room at Benchmark International Arena. The show starts at 7 p.m. with a surprise Lightning player. Go to boltsradio.com/blockpartylive to secure your table now.
One quick anecdote before we break, because I saw that Dominic James was a freshman at Duluth when Noah Cates was a senior at Duluth. Noah Cates was the captain that year, and then basically went right to the NHL afterward. We know James eventually became a captain at Duluth, so I asked James this morning, or I confirmed that he was there. Yeah. He's like, he was my captain my freshman year. He's like, huge influence on my career. He's like, I could see that he's an NHL player when he was in college. Now, remember, Duluth won back-to-back titles prior to that. So I said, were a lot of the players on that team your freshman year part of the title? He's like, all of them were. So he's like, and then he said, we should have won it that year. I didn't go back and look and see what happened. But he said, I still text with him. I said, well, what do you text him at? Or what did you lean on him for? He's like, I was asking what to expect in training camp and all that. So, we see how Dominic James came in and grabbed the bull by the horns, as they say. One of his, we'll call it his mentors or people that really had a profound impact on his career playing on the other side tonight for Philadelphia. So I thought that was an interesting story, interesting connection.
Probably helped. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I'll catch you tonight.
See you
Phil.
tonight.
All right. Mish right there. Thanks, Steve Ersnick, as well. And for all of you listening, I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.